The planet Valora floated like a dream in the vast dark of space, covered with blue forests and islands that drifted in the sky like clouds made of stone. The air shimmered with soft light, and from far below, creatures with bright wings could be seen gliding through the mist. The people of Valora, tall and graceful with skin that glowed faintly under the sun, ruled the skies. They were called the Valorans, and they lived in high cities built along the edges of cliffs. To them, the sky was home. To them, flying was life itself. When humans first arrived, the Valorans treated them with polite distance. The humans came in ships full of tools and noise, unable to fly without their machines. The Valorans found that both amusing and sad. They believed that real flight came from courage and bond, not from engines and steel. Among those humans was Ethan Cole, a pilot who had once flown combat ships before peace had grounded him. He had seen many worlds, but nothing like Valora. The planet made him feel small, yet alive again. Ethan's team had come for peaceful exchange, to learn and to understand the Valoran way of life. But the Valorans were proud. They didn't respect words easily. They respected action. One of the young warriors, Lyra, made that very clear the moment she saw Ethan. Lyra was known for her boldness. Her hair shimmered with violet light under the twin suns, and her wings stretched wide behind her like a storm about to break. She was brave, but she also carried a certain arrogance that came with her skill. She had bonded with one of the most feared creatures in the sky, an Ikran. These massive, dragon-like beasts were not tamed. They chose their riders only once in life, and if they didn't choose, they killed. When Ethan first tried to speak to Lyra, she looked him over with a small smirk. "You call yourself a pilot?" she asked. "Then tell me, human, can you fly without a machine?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Flying is about more than wings," he said. "It's about knowing how the sky moves." Lyra laughed, sharp and cold like thunder. "If you're a real pilot, prove it. Ride my Ikran, then I'll believe you." The words caught the attention of everyone nearby. Valoran warriors turned their heads. Some began whispering. No human had ever tried to ride an Ikran, and it was madness. The creature would crush him before he got near. But Lyra's eyes sparkled with challenge. She didn't think he'd say yes. Ethan looked up toward the cliffs where the Ikran nested. His expression didn't change. "All right," he said. "Show me the way." The Valoran stared at him as if he had just signed his death sentence. Lyra's smirk faded for a brief second. She hadn't expected him to agree. "You don't know what you're asking for," she said quietly. "I know enough," he replied. The climb to the Ikran's roost was steep and long. The path wound through glowing vines and hot winds that carried the scent of lightning. The Valoran crowd followed at a distance, waiting to see the foolish humans end. Lyra walked beside Ethan, her tone quieter now. "You can still walk away," she said. He shook his head. "I've walked away from too many things already." Lyra didn't understand that answer, but it made her curious. She glanced at him again, the way his steps were sure, the way his eyes didn't waver. Most humans looked frightened near the heights. He didn't. When they reached the top, the Ikran was waiting. Its wings were folded like blades of metal, its skin glimmering blue and green like a living jewel. The creature's eyes were bright gold, and its growl made the rocks tremble. The Valorans who had followed stopped several meters away. No one spoke. Ethan looked at the creature for a long moment. It was beautiful and terrifying. He remembered his first flight, a burning ship caught in the gravity of a dying moon. He had felt the same fear then and the same pull of wonder. He took a slow breath and stepped closer. The Ikran hissed, spreading its wings, ready to strike. Lyra tensed. "That's close enough," she warned. "It will kill you," but Ethan didn't stop. His voice was calm when he spoke. "Easy there," he said quietly, the same tone he used to steady his aircraft long ago. "You don't know me yet." The creature's golden eyes flicked to him. Its nostrils flared, catching his scent, his heartbeat. Ethan stopped only a few feet away. The crowd held their breath. Lyra's hand hovered near her blade, ready to stop the beast if it attacked. But she wasn't sure she could do it fast enough. Ethan stood still for a moment. Then he closed his eyes and stretched out one hand, palm open. The wind howled through the cliffs, lifting dust and sparks of light. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then slowly, impossibly, the Ikran lowered its head. Its great golden eyes stared into his. The sound that followed was not a roar, but a low, deep rumble, like distant thunder softening into peace. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. Ethan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "You're not angry," he said softly to the beast. "You're just waiting for someone to understand." He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on the creature's snout. The Ikran didn't pull away. Instead, it made a low sound, something between a sigh and a growl. The bond, a thing Valoran spoke of only in sacred terms, was forming. The crowd gasped. Even Lyra's mentor, who had trained warriors for decades, looked stunned. "Impossible," he murmured. "No human should be able to do that." Lyra stood frozen. Her heart raced in confusion and awe. She had spent years training to earn her Ikran's trust. It had taken pain, blood, and time. And this human, this quiet stranger, had done it in minutes. She felt anger rising in her, but it wasn't hatred. It was something else. Something she couldn't name. Ethan looked up at her. "You said I should prove it," he said calmly. "Do I have your permission to ride?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "If it accepts you, you don't need my permission." Ethan nodded and slowly climbed onto the Ikran's back. The creature moved, wings spreading, testing the air. Lightning flashed across the horizon, painting the sky purple and gold. The moment the Ikran leapt from the cliff, the entire crowd screamed in shock. The wind hit Ethan's face like a wall. The sky opened around him, endless, alive. He held tight, but not from fear. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, freedom. The Ikran roared and dove through the clouds, then rose sharply, spinning around one of the floating islands. Ethan's heart pounded with joy. He didn't steer the creature. He simply moved with it, learning its rhythm, its will. Every motion was a dance between two living beings, and no control, just understanding. Down below, the Valorans could barely speak. They watched the human and the Ikran glide together through stormlight, turning danger into beauty. The thunder grew louder, but so did the gasps and murmurs of disbelief. Lyra's eyes followed every movement. She had flown through those skies 100 times, but she had never seen anything like this. When the Ikran landed again, dust swirled around its claws. Ethan slid down from its back and stood quietly, breathing hard but smiling. The Ikran lowered its head once more, bowing slightly, a sign of deep respect among its kind. No one moved for several seconds. Then slowly Lyra stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly, but her pride wouldn't let her show it completely. "How?" she asked. "How did you make it trust you?" Ethan looked at her, still catching his breath. "I didn't make it trust me," he said. "I listened." "Listened?" she repeated. He nodded. "When I flew ships, I treated them the same way. Machines can feel your fear, your tension. If you fight them, they fight you. If you listen, they guide you. This creature, it's no different. It wanted to know if I respected it. That's all." Lyra stared at him in silence. Around them, the Valorans whispered to one another, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. For centuries, they had thought humans were tied to the ground, creatures who built machines because they couldn't understand the sky. But now one human had proved them wrong. Ethan stepped back from the Ikran and looked over the cliff edge. The clouds glowed with the fading light of sunset. He could feel every muscle in his body still trembling from the flight, but it wasn't from fear. It was from exhilaration. He turned slightly toward Lyra. "You said flying was about courage," he said. "You were right. But courage isn't always about fighting the storm. Sometimes it's about trusting it." Lyra's expression softened. She had no answer for that. The words lingered in her mind long after he walked away from the roost. That night, as the Valoran city lights flickered across the sky, people spoke in hushed tones about the human who rode the Ikran. Some called it luck. Others called it a sign. But Lyra couldn't stop thinking about the calm look in his eyes when he faced the beast. She had always believed humans were weak. Now she wasn't so sure. She stood alone near the cliffs, watching the same sky Ethan had flown through. Somewhere inside, something changed. A question formed, one that refused to fade. What if the humans had something the Valorans had forgotten? What if their strength wasn't in wings, but in heart? And as the night deepened, she looked toward the human camp, wondering what else this quiet man could teach her about courage and about herself. The morning sun broke over Velora's floating cliffs, spilling golden light across the sky and painting the clouds in shades of pink and violet. Ethan sat near the edge of the human camp, stretching his arms and feeling the wind against his face. His muscles still ached from the flight yesterday, but he could feel a spark inside him he hadn't felt in years, the joy of real flight. Not the kind powered by engines or circuits, but the kind born from courage and trust. Lyra approached silently, her wings folded neatly behind her. She had watched him from afar all night, unable to sleep. Her mind replayed the human's calm, confident movements, the way he spoke softly to the Ikran as if the creature understood every word. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about pride or challenge. She was thinking about understanding. "You survived," she said softly, standing beside him. Ethan glanced at her and smiled faintly. "I did. So did your Ikran." She frowned slightly, a mix of curiosity and pride twisting her expression. "I thought no human could ever ride an Ikran. I was wrong." He shrugged lightly. "I didn't do it alone. I listened, that's all." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Listening isn't enough. You have to prove it. You have to fly with me in a proper challenge. You need to show you can move like a Valeran, not just survive one ride." Ethan laughed softly. "A challenge, huh? I like that." By mid-morning, they had reached a high cliff where the Valeran training grounds lay. Ikrans of all sizes hovered in the sky, their riders practicing dives, rolls, and synchronized turns. The air was alive with the sound of flapping wings and low growls. Lyra stepped forward, and her Ikran's eyes locked on hers with fierce recognition. The bond was deep, built over years. Ethan approached, and Lyra's Ikran gave a low hiss. Most humans would have stepped back, but he didn't. He spoke softly, the same calm voice from yesterday. "We'll move together. I won't fight you." The Ikran tilted its head, considering him. Then, in a move that surprised everyone watching, it lowered itself slightly. Lyra blinked. "Impossible," she muttered. Ethan climbed onto the Ikran's back slowly, keeping his movement smooth and deliberate. Lyra watched closely, impressed despite herself. The human didn't attempt to control the beast. He simply adjusted his weight, his balance, and the creature responded immediately. When they leapt from the cliff, the world seemed to explode around them. The wind tore through their hair and feathers, lightning flashed in the clouds, and the floating islands below twisted and shimmered in surreal colors. Ethan felt the familiar thrill of flight, but this time it was amplified. He wasn't just moving through air. He was moving with life. Lyra followed, her Ikran mirroring every movement he made, diving and rolling in perfect harmony. The human's instinctive understanding of flight amazed everyone. He moved with the Ikran as if they were one being. Valeran warriors watching from below whispered among themselves. "It's impossible," one said. "Humans cannot do this." Hours passed as they flew together through the storm-touched sky. Ethan guided the Ikran through narrow canyons, skimming past jagged cliffs and weaving between floating islands. Every movement was precise yet fluid, balancing courage and trust. Lyra tried to push him, testing his skill and control, but Ethan met each challenge with calm determination. At one point, a sudden gust of wind threatened to throw them off balance. Lyra's Ikran hissed and flapped wildly. Ethan leaned into the motion, adjusting with subtle movements that matched the creature's instincts. The Ikran steadied, responding to him as if they had flown together for years. Lyra could hardly believe it. "You're not just surviving," she shouted over the wind. "You're flying like one of us." Ethan laughed. "I told you. It's not about control. It's about understanding." They continued, pushing higher into the storm clouds. Lightning cracked around them, illuminating the floating islands with harsh white light. Ethan felt the raw power of nature coursing through his veins, but he didn't panic. He had faced worse storms in space, and now he faced this one with the same calm determination. As they reached the highest cliff, Lyra's Ikran began a complex maneuver, diving toward a narrow canyon below. Most humans would have panicked, but Ethan leaned into the dive, feeling the rush of air and the pull of gravity. The Ikran responded instantly, twisting and banking as they followed the narrow path. Lyra's jaw dropped. You actually understand it?" Ethan shouted over the roar of wind and thunder. "It's all about listening, not fighting." They soared back up from the canyon, flipping and rolling through the clouds with perfect timing. The Valoran crowd below erupted into cheers and shouts. Even the elders who had doubted humans for centuries stared in awe. Lyra's mentor muttered, "A human, moving like one of us. It cannot be." Finally, as the storm began to calm, Ethan guided the Ikran to a smooth landing on a high cliff. The creature knelt gently, allowing him to slide off. Lyra's Ikran landed beside them, watching the human with a mixture of suspicion and admiration. Lyra could no longer hide her amazement. You've changed everything I thought about humans, she admitted quietly. Ethan smiled, brushing dust from his clothes. I've always thought humans underestimated themselves. You just hadn't seen it yet. For a long moment they stood in silence, looking out over the floating islands and glowing forests. The wind rustled their hair and feathers, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant storms. The world felt alive in a way neither of them could explain. Lyra stepped closer, her wings folding neatly behind her. You've earned my respect, she said. Not because you wrote an Ikran, but because you understood it. That is what makes a pilot, human or Valoran. Ethan's smile widened. Then I guess the next challenge is yours. Lyra laughed softly, a sound full of relief and excitement. Next time we race, she said. I want to see if your human skills can keep up with Valoran speed. He grinned. Deal. But this time I pick my Ikran. They both laughed, the sound carrying across the cliffs like a promise. The other Valorans watched them with quiet respect. They had witnessed something rare, a human who didn't just survive the sky but truly became part of it. As evening fell, Ethan and Lyra sat near the edge of the cliff, looking out over Vialora. The sky was calm now and the stars began to sparkle against the darkening blue. Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. You've changed the way I see humans. Maybe there's more to them than I thought. Ethan nodded. We've all got courage inside us, he said. Sometimes we just need a chance to show it. The two of them stayed there long into the night, watching the Ikrans settle on their roosts, and dreaming of the flights they would share tomorrow. Somewhere deep inside, Lyra realized that the human beside her had done more than just ride her Ikran. He had shown her a truth her people had long forgotten, that courage and understanding could bridge worlds, that flying was more than wings or machines, and that humans, too, could belong among the skies. By the time the twin moons rose over the cliffs, a bond had been formed, not just between human and Ikran, but between two very different worlds. And in that quiet, magical moment, both Ethan and Lyra knew that this was only the beginning of their story. Tomorrow, they would race. Tomorrow, they would explore more of Vialora together. But tonight, they simply watched the stars. And for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe that humans might be more than she ever imagined. The wind whispered across the floating islands, carrying with it the promise of new adventures, and somewhere high above the Ikran stirred, as if sensing the bond between the human and the Vialoran girl. The sky was alive, and now humans were a part of it.